And welcome back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. I'm Kevin Bowen. Back in studio here. Happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone out there. Hope they enjoyed it with family and had a safe time as well. And wasn't the same for me, Chris Presley. You know, I woke up Sunday morning and I should be getting into the car. I should be packing the cooler. I should be heading down to 16th and Georgetown. But unfortunately, no Indy 500. Hopefully everything will go according to plan in August, though. But all things considered, how was the weekend for you?
It was good. I mean, like you mentioned, not having the Indy 500 this year, at least during May, was unique and odd. But all things considered, everything went well. Everyone was safe. Thank you to the troops. Thank you for everyone who gives us that Monday off for all their service. But yeah, it will always come back this year. Looking back at the 2020 year, not having the Indy 500. People around the country, friends of mine from college, texting me, no race today is odd even for them.
Yeah, for sure. There is, I feel like, a massive void even in the sports calendar. So there's only so much that the match could satisfy us with on Sunday with Tiger and Peyton and Tom and Phil Mickelson competing in that. So, again, hope everyone had a great time over the weekend. And thanks for listening to last week's podcast and for chiming in on Chris's debut pod. It was fun being back in studio, and this will be how we will try and operate over the next few weeks. We'll have a little bit of an intermission for baby Bowen to be born. But yeah, we'll try to get back into the Tuesday morning, time slot for you. But with the Memorial Day weekend, we pushed it back a day. So today's podcast, we go over it. Obviously, tons of Twitter questions. I sent out a tweet early this morning. This is Wednesday morning when we are recording. Some of them we just won't get to. We'll save those for next week, so don't fret if you don't hear a question. We'll hold those off to next week. But I did want to hit on a little bit of the Ryan Kelly extension talk. I know we touched on T.Y. Hilton last week, and I think Ryan Kelly is a guy that, honestly, if you didn't have the COVID aspect going on, I think it'd be a deal that would be a no-brainer to get done here over the next few weeks. So we'll hit on that. And then for those that missed it on the website, I did a film breakdown on Jacob Eason, looking back at his 2019 season with Washington and try to, again, dive a little bit deeper into exactly what the Colts are getting, what is great, what needs work, where Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni and Marcus Brady, the quarterback's coach, where they can come into play with his growth and development, because that is an absolute must, especially when he's not likely to get any sort of game reps. So those would be kind of the two main topics that we get into before Twitter questions.
Yeah, and I'm interested. I read your article as always. Ryan Kelly. I mean, he's the guy up front. You want to build around the center. We were so fortunate enough to have Jeff Saturday at the forefront of this offensive line for so many years here in Indy. And the relationship he had with Peyton Manning, how that drives the offense. Just talk about what Ryan Kelly means to this team and why we do need to lock him up at 27 years old.
Yeah, it was funny when Frank Reich took the job in 2018. He remembers going to Chris Ballard and saying, Ryan Kelly's got to be an alpha for us. Like, he has got to be that dude. And think about the revolving door at center before Ryan Kelly was drafted in the first round. It was Samson Satele and A.Q. Shipley and homeboy Mike McGlynn, I think, even got a look. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple. Jonathan Harrison, the undrafted kid out of Florida. Like, it was just a revolving door of Andrew Luck putting his hands on someone's butt, every other week seemingly. And you couldn't have that. And so, Ryan Grigson wisely, smartly made the draft pick of Ryan Kelly, I think 18th overall back in 2016. But as Kelly has admitted, he suffered the injury bug that second and third year mainly. I think he missed a total of 13 games. And what I like about Ryan Kelly, and I think what Frank Reich likes about him as well, is he is a blunt, honest human being. And, Frank said, something to the effect of, like, when Ryan Kelly talks, you all kind of listen. He just has that sort of presence, that voice that he means business, and he's going to be very straightforward with you. And Ryan was that after the 2019 season, or the 2018 season, when he was like, okay, I've missed 13 games the past 2 years. I'm reaching the end of this rookie contract. I got to show up. I've got to make sure that I can be a durable guy for this football team, because that's what Jeff Saturday was,
right?
For all those years. And Kelly did that. Played 16 games last season, started all 16, obviously. And I just think it makes a lot of sense. And Kelly mentioned last week that his agent, Jimmy Sexton, one of the mega agents in the NFL, has had talks with the Colts about a contract extension. Right now, he would play out that fifth-year team option. So think back to Malik Hooker didn't get the fifth-year team option for first-round picks. Ryan Kelly did get it. And it makes sense to extend Kelly. I would think COVID would be the only reason that you don't, because you're afraid of maybe what the cap situation will look like in 2021 and beyond. But still, I think that he makes the most sense to me of any of these guys we've talked about. Hilton, Marlon Mack. Like you said, he's only 27 years old. That is a bit old for the end of a rookie contract, but he's a freaking center.
Right.
Shit, I mean, centers can play until they're mid-30s. So I see no reason why I wouldn't give him a 4 or 5 year deal and make him one of the highest paid centers in the NFL. He is a guy that I think in a Frank Reich offense, Morris put on the center's plate. You and Jacoby Brissett or Phillip Rivers or Andrew Luck, you've got to sit down with them and you formulate the progression plan, or I should say the pass protection plan of like, okay, we need to make the calls at the line of scrimmage. This is a 1-2 sort of setting. We do all this work and prep time throughout the course of the week. And Kelly just means a whole lot. And continuity means so much. You know, if you can sign Kelly, now all of a sudden you have all 5 of those starters signed through 2021.
Right.
And, I mean, they have preached continuity for years here. Colts fans know full well all the different combinations Andrew Luck played behind. Boy, it just checks so many boxes for me. When they drafted Danny Pintner out of Ball State, it was interesting to me that they briefly mentioned Pinter potentially being a center. Mm-hmm. And so for a minute, I'm like, oh, God, is this Julian Blackmon as the legit free safety? And this is some writing on the wall. But I think, you know, he's more of just like, in a pinch, he can do it. He's never done it. He's never even played guard at the NFL level. But I think he's just more of, okay, that's your top backup. And potentially, you know, maybe when Mark Lewinsky's contract comes up after 2021, that's where he factors into things. So.
Now, do you have any concern with his quote talking about that he had, you know, he obviously admitted, yes, I had some injuries earlier in my career,
right,
and that he's still, quote unquote, dealing with a few things? Or is that just telling of that's just the average NFL player anymore? You're always going to have some bugs there.
Yeah, I think it's more of that. You know, last year, I'm trying to think of the game. Was it Pittsburgh he got hurt in, and he came out of that game? I think it might have been that. There's one game where he got banged up. So I think that's just kind of par for the course. Mm-hmm. So last year, all 16 games. His rookie year, I think he had 15. You know, he had the really bad concussion at the end of maybe 2017. And, I mean, that was like a, you know, month-long ordeal for him. So I also think where it matters to me is two things with Kelly. First, going back to his bluntness, I love when he said last week, I felt like at times we were playing not to lose.
Right.
It's such a telling quote of, I felt like the Colts in the fourth quarter were like, 4-corner offense, here we go, spread it out. There's no shot clock in Indiana high school basketball. We're good here. You know, like I felt like it was that approach of like, just bleed, baby. Just bleed. Get me to the zeros. And when you hear about we need more friction in the locker room, we meet, you know, guys that are going to press buttons on other guys and say like, no, this is the standard. I think Ryan Kelly has a little bit of that. To me, he's the right mix of vocal leader, but also action leader. He's not just going to talk just to talk, but he's going to give you a little bit more vocalness than maybe a Costanzo or even a Nelson.
Right.
So yeah, it's to me the reason why I would cross this off the list if I were Chris Ballard. Because think about all the decisions you're about to make or have to make. We've talked about this last week with the Hilton debate. If you look at 22 starters, I could say 10 of them you're going to have to make some sort of move on or commit some sort of extension to. I mean, we're talking Rivers, Mack, Hilton, Trey Burton, Kelly obviously would be in that mix as well. Justin Houston, Danico Autry, Grover Stewart, Anthony Walker, Darius Leonard needs the extension, Xavier Rhodes, Malik Hooker. I mean, that's a long list.
That is a very long list.
And those are some big names. Trey Burton, I guess, is on that list. I mean, those are some meaningful names. So I just think, cross Kelly off it would make a lot of sense to me.
Well, talking about decisions in the future, going back to the Rivers, obviously that then brings you to the man who potentially could be under center at some point in Jacob Eason.
Yeah.
And you have an article up on 1075thefan.com right now that talks about a couple breakdowns of him. Let's talk about his arm.
Yeah, and briefly, I want to toss this in before I mention his arm. For those of you that don't know Eason's story, which I think a lot of people do know it, he's if you follow college football, you probably have heard of Jacob Eason. He's a 5-star recruit, the can't-miss prospect, northern suburb out of Seattle, goes to Georgia, and starts right as a true freshman. I mean, 18-year-old in the SEC.
Yeah.
You better hope you get a girlfriend early, man, because you're going to get exposed real quick there. But, had a nice freshman season. He early enrolled, then gets hurt in 2017. I think the opener Georgia had.
Yep.
And he got hurt, and Jake Fromm slid in there, and that was the end of it. And he transferred back to Washington, sat out the 2018 season for transfer rules, played in 2019. So it gets back to what we talked about last week. The guy's got very little experience in games compared to drafted quarterbacks. He started for 2 years. That is on the low end of starting experience for guys we saw drafted last year. His numbers for his 4 seasons, playing pretty much just 2 seasons, were as followed. 59.8% passer. Do you actually see those numbers up there?
Yeah.
Rattle those off for us. 59.8%.
Yeah. 5,590 yards, 7-point yards per attempt, 39 touchdowns, 16 interceptions.
His teams were 17-10.
They were 17-10 in just 4 games with more than 300 yards.
Yeah, and I found that maybe the most interesting. You look at a lot of these drafted quarterbacks. I mean, Joe Burrow had 4 300-yard games in 1 month.
Right.
He wasn't asked to do a whole lot. Now, for a true freshman at Georgia, when you got that defense and those running backs, hell, I don't blame you. You're not going to put a whole lot on his plate. I maybe would have liked to have seen a little bit more at Washington last season of I'm the alpha. Let's frickin' go. This might be my only shot at it. And clearly it was. He decided to leave early. But, all right, let's dive into things. Like you said, the arm. It's incredible. It is a howitzer-like cannon. I watched him attempt balls, complete balls, I should say, that the Colts didn't even try to attempt last season. And we're talking outside the numbers. We're talking deep down the sideline. When the pocket is clean and the progressions are minimal, Jacob Eason puts the ball more often than not on the money. And I think he has great ball placement. Putting it in his wide out tight end hands and he didn't play with a great skill group. I don't think any of them got drafted. He gives those guys a little bit of chance after the ball. There's some velocity to it. And I thought Frank Reich described it really well when Eason was drafted of when you hear arm talent, I think we all hear he can just chuck it 70 yards. Well, no, arm talent is a little bit more than that. Different arm angles when you're under pressure, touch, different heights to balls, all of those things, makes you, I think, have elite arm talent. And Reich, mentioned that of frozen ropes and changing speeds and those sorts of things that Eason has. I know I've mentioned this before, but if you want to watch Jacob Eason and you want to fall in love with him, go watch BYU the first half. I mean, right there, you see why there was round 1 talk for quite a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, and that to me stood out because that was one of the games that I watched. I probably watched 6 or 7 games. That is his first road start. And, Provo, that's no joke. what else are you doing in Utah? Like, if you aren't skiing, you're obviously cheering for your football team. And that was a hostile environment, and he went in there and played his ass off throughout that first half. And they got a convincing road win after he kind of struggled in his first meaningful start. I think they played directional school like Eastern Washington to start the year. Then they played Cal in their own backyard.
Right.
And he struggled a bit against Cal. Weather was mediocre in that game, whatnot. I think they had a rain delay at one point. But the arm, man, it's like I said, when you watch the YouTube videos of him, it's like seeing the home run hitter hit a bunch of bombs. It's seeing the great dunker. Like, you can really fall in love with it. But I think what we talked about through the draft process is, what can you teach? What can't you teach? You can't teach the arm.
No.
You cannot. And these other things that we're going to go through with Eason, they are teachable. They are difficult. I'm not saying they're easy to teach, but they are more teachable in my mind than it is the arm. And I think today's game has evolved a bit, and feel free to disagree if you do, but when I look at Manning and Brady and Breeze, I don't think we talk about the howitzer of an arm.
No.
That's not like the first thing that we talk about with those guys. But when you talk Mahomes, that's frequently the first thing that you mention. Deshaun Watson, terrific arm. Like, those are some of these younger quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers, great arm talent. I know he isn't, he's obviously much closer to the Manning, Breeze, Brady age than he is these younger guys. But that's where I think Eason falls into it.
When he was at Georgia, I remember his freshman year that a lot of people, and because he was at Georgia, they compared him and hoped that he was a Matthew Stafford type of quarterback.
Right, exactly. That's a great name to throw out there. And I think that's what you're hoping for here. And, Stafford's had a really nice career individually. Obviously, the wins and losses have not been there for the Lions, but from a statistical standpoint, playing in Detroit's like playing in Cleveland.
Right.
You just go there to burn a little bit. So, it is by far the best attribute that Eason has, and fans are going to fall in love with him watching that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just hard not to want to hug and want to just be like, oh my gosh, that is so cool.
Back to the old Braves famous commercial back in the 90s, chicks did the long ball.
Yes.
Like, you love Josh Allen. I mean, people love the long ball.
People love it. And when you throw out those numbers, 59%, 4 games over 300 yards, 17-10 is it's not crazy eye-popping. So why was there this obsession? It's the arm. And now it's, okay, that's the unteachable part. Can you teach the rest?
Well, talking about teaching and unteachable and the scouting that you've done looking at those games, pre-snap command, what does that look like for him?
Yeah, and maybe I'm being a little bit too critical because obviously he started as a true freshman and then he was a 1-year starter at Washington. And let's be honest, that was not just hand him the starting job. He struggled, might be too harsh. It was a little bit more of a battle than I think many people expected for Washington going into last season from a quarterback competition. I just saw a little bit more sideline stuff than I wanted to see. And what I mean by that is you're looking to the sideline and you're asking if it's okay. And again, I might be a little bit too harsh here, and part of this is college football. I mean, college football is okay. SpongeBob, Beyonce, Donald Trump, and Fritos are all on a sign, right. And you got to look at that, and it's like, boom, what are you gonna do? Selfishly, I just like a guy that's in a little bit more command of it, and maybe I'm a little biased because you grow up watching Peyton Manning, and it's so much of that. But I want a guy that's I'll line you up, I'll make the checks, I know down and distance, I know game situations. Let me do my thing because it is a very think on your feet sort of position. And you have to make those quick adjustments, especially in Frank Reich's offense.
Yeah.
Because, and Jacoby Brissett's he's not looking at the sideline. He was in command last year. You are given a level of responsibility in Frank Reich's offense that you were not given in college. So I guess Jacob Eason better get used to it. If you're going to be his QB, you have to make these sorts of decisions on your own. There will be some input and certainly a lot of stuff discussed throughout a week and in between series and things like that, but it is on you to do that. I felt like it was just like a holding of hand a little bit too much.
Yeah, and obviously I know this isn't a baseball podcast, but do apples and oranges. There's a lot of teams in baseball that when they're drafting a catcher, they don't want a guy that looks over to the bullpen or the dugout, I should say, every pitch. Hey, coach, what am I throwing here?
Call your own game.
Buster Posey,
right.
I'm calling the game at Florida State. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. And that's something that I want to see a little bit more out of because you got to have that confidence. Everyone's looking at you. All 10 of those guys in that huddle are looking at you. And if you need to go double-check things, are they going to question you?
Right.
That's my worry with the pre-snap command stuff.
And there's one thing pre-snap, but then that also leads into when the ball is snapped and it's in your hands, looking at the progressions.
Right.
Because you can't look to the sideline at that point. You got to be looking. You got to be looking at the field. And I love Frank Reich's take on taking things in chunks, as he said.
Yeah, that is. I'm glad you brought that up. And this is kind of the third takeaway that I had is, and Eason has admitted this himself. He's got to nail down his progressions a little bit better. And Reich talked about this of the term that you just used of chunking. And chunking is not some like innovative term that only the Colts use. I think it is pretty widely used around the NFL and really all levels of football. But what you're trying to do is break down the 11-man defense into chunks, into 3 or 4 sections. So you know if this section is doing this, the other section is probably doing that. And obviously that can get into disguising, and the NFL is going to look a whole lot different than college. But that's what you're trying to just slow down post-snap how things look for you. And you don't have to identify all 11 players on the defense, because if you do that, you're just going to bang your head against the wall. So I guess with Eason and just the whole progressions, it goes back to the arm thing. When things were simple and he had one read, maybe 2 reads, boom. It's great. It's really good. When it's second, third read, we're going to drop a lot into coverage. We're going to make you think, make you read us. That's where I saw a little bit of issue with him. Now, college offense, I think in general, are a bit simpler. So usually it is quicker rhythm. Obviously, the Colts want to be quicker rhythm, but still, there is something to the point of, and this is kind of a juicy quarterback, phrase of like, can your eyes move the defense?
Right.
Can you do things to where you're looking here and all of a sudden there is an open window and you can make that throw, and you have played that out in your hand. You are tricking the defense into that. The one stat that I didn't love, Washington was great inside the red zone. Really good last year. I want to say they were like top 10 inside the red zone in all of college football. They were like, I want to say it was like 102 or something, 103 in third down offense. Yeah. And I mean, hell, there's only what?
102nd out of 130 teams.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that ain't good.
No.
And when I think of third down, to me, that's more of reading progressions. That's, okay, it's 3rd and 7. They can bring heavy pressure. They might disguise coverage. Red zone, it's a little bit more, congested in that there's so much you can do as a defense. There's so much of a field you can attack offensively. Whereas, when it's third down, you've got pretty much the whole field as long as you're not in the red zone. So those are all things that I think he needs to work on. And this, to me, might be one of the easier things for him to work on, because you can do so much classroom work of like, all right, now I know when they're playing this defense, I go here with it. And it is a very sort of, these are our rules as a passing offense. These are our rules for our wideouts and tight ends to follow. That's how things go. I'm thinking back to the Oakland game last year. End of the Oakland game, Jacoby throws the pick 6 to end it. Zach Pascal, I believe, was the intended target. Pascal there doesn't run the right route. Or I shouldn't say doesn't run the right route, but his release there wasn't what it should have been against that coverage. And now there are rules of like, he just broke a rule, you don't throw that ball. Now, Jacoby shouldn't have thrown it because the coverage was just sitting there. But again, it's like this broken rule all of a sudden led to that sort of interception. You're going to learn all of this in a Frank Reich offense.
And you want to talk about a money down. Literally, third down, you convert those, the contracts get a little bit bigger. You got to get that third down conversion.
100%. And the Colts, led the league, I want to say, with Andrew Luck in 2018 in third down. So, Frank Reich threw out the funny phrase of rookies can see ghosts. And obviously the Sam Darnold Monday Night Football, sort of bit comes to that. So that's what they're trying to eliminate with this whole chunking method.
Right. And that just leads you into the pressure. I mean, the pressure of being a starting quarterback in the NFL. How can a guy who's played more or less 2 seasons, as you mentioned, handle that sort of pressure when his time does come?
Yeah, and when we're talking pressure here, I legitimately am saying like blitzing pressure. Like that's what it is to me. From a handling pressure standpoint, it's interesting. Eason was the 5-star recruit. He played in the SEC. He went back and started for his hometown team. Like you would like to think that he's felt some pressure on a relatively high stage. Has he been at Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow level in terms of getting to the Final Four? No, but like there's been certainly some pressure from around him and some of the atmospheres that he's been thrown into. But again, it comes back to, for me, the blitzing pressure. He has mentioned this before, Eason, that his footwork probably needs the most work in terms of like a fundamental physical aspect of the game. Mm-hmm. And I think you got to clean that up. At times, I watch him, I'm like, he just thinks the arm can make up for sloppy footwork. It's like, oh, that's going to save me. And it's like,
At Washington.
Yeah, exactly. Not on Sundays at 3rd and 7 against the Baltimore Ravens defense or something like that. Yeah, that is a great point. And I often think back to the Andrew Luck quote when he came back from the Netherlands of like, I need to build from the base down. Like that's what I need to do. And that comes back to the footwork and just, this is where the worry for me comes into play of like, does he need the game reps to truly fine-tune this?
Yeah.
A red jersey in a practice setting is fine and well. Do you need the game reps? So, yeah, that's pretty much the whole breakdown. In my opinion, he should have gone back to school because I think the game reps are just so valuable for him. But the Colts have got to develop the whole footwork, and then it's mental. It'll take work, but the arm is luscious. I mean, the arm is unteachable, like I said. So if you missed any of that, check that out on 107.5 The Fan.
Let's jump into some Twitter questions. What do you say?
Let's do them. And again, for those, we had a ton of them. Some of them we probably won't get to, so we're gonna hold off a little bit on those until next week's podcast. But yeah, let's get into them.
Yeah, as always, a lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback. Logan wants to know, how many players on the Colts roster do you feel are currently at the top 10 of their position?
Oh, wow. Top 10 whole league, I assume Logan's saying there. Nelson, Leonard, Costanzo, Kelly, Buckner, Kenny Moore. Am I missing anybody? Marlon Mack, Fringe, T.Y. Hilton if he's healthy, sure. Jack Doyle, probably right on the fringe. Justin Houston, I'd say on the fringe. Yeah.
I mean, that's 9 guys. That's
That's
a pretty good amount.
And it is a good amount. The thing that I will continue to argue of with this roster is just that from 1 to 53, the depth has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
So much better. It's the impactful positions. Can all of a sudden you create a quarterback is on that list. A number 1 wideout is without question on that list. An elite pass rusher is on that list and is not the age of 31. An outside corner is on that. Those are some of the things where I think this roster's got to evolve.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, do you think Eberflus is on the hot seat at all? It seems to Chris, who asked this question, that 3 years in, the defense needs to improve quite a bit. He's heard that the 3 most important pieces to this defense is the will, the 3-tech, and the nickel. But it seems that it's hard to improve much more from Leonard, Buckner, and Moore.
Yeah. He is right about that. I mean, the Colts finally feel like they have their triangle, if you will, in place with the 3 technique, the will, and the nickel. Those are the hot spots of this defense. Do I think Eberflus on the hot seat at all? Boy, a little bit of a voice crack there to get me going. No, I don't. I don't get that vibe at all. I think our listeners know full well what I think of this defensive scheme. But just internally, from what the Colts think, I don't get that vibe. I think go back and listen to Frank Reich last week, and there's an article up on 1075thefan.com about it. In a notebook that I had of, he feels like Eberflus has evolved a little bit more from a schematic standpoint. What I have always thought was odd with this situation, Chris, is he was a Ballard hire. Mm-hmm. He's the only Ballard hire, or I should say Ballard McDaniels hire. He's the only Ballard hire left. Mike Fair is now in Carolina, and Gouge got fired after his first season as O-line coach. So, is that awkward at all? Frank Reich didn't make this hire. What? I mean, if you're Frank Reich and you're going to let your defense be run by one human being, boy, that's a lot of responsibility. Because in this league, oftentimes you got one chance to be a head coach. Mm-hmm. And I would want to make that. It's like the whole loyalty to the Ballard McDaniels hires. I get it to a degree, but it's like, man, that's a lot of. Hey, here's your most important hire that you're going to make. You can't choose that. If I'm a head coach, I might be like, oh God.
As a fan, I thought it spoke more to who he was as a man.
For sure. And
for Frank to come in and still keep that person, let me believe as a fan, the X's and O's, he knows his stuff.
Yeah, and I get it, and that is great, and I will never question Frank Reich as a human being. I mean, that dude is a Class A individual. If I were Frank Reich, though, I'd just be kind of sleeping at night being like, boy, I hope that guy's good. I mean, you didn't do any research on him. Sure, you've seen him a couple times in the NFC East, but he's a first-time coordinator too. Yeah. It's not like you're hiring Wade Phillips, or something like that. So yeah, those are just thoughts that run through my head. But again, the personnel's finally in place. It is time for this defense to show up, and the back-to-back years of allowing just an insane completion percentage has got to cease. I mean, it has got to come to an end. So I don't get the vibe that he is on the hot seat internally, but for what it's worth, the Kevin Bowen hot seat, it's time to freaking show up on that side of the ball.
Yeah,
I'm tired of the excuses and the slow build and all of this. You've set NFL records in the worst way possible the last 2 years. It's time to end that.
Well, Josh wants to know, with that young defense, what's more likely, that defense and Rivers propel us to an AFC South win or victory, or that the Colts go 7-9 once again?
Yeah, I'll say win the division. 7-9 with this schedule, that would not be a good look. Look. So, yeah, I'll say win the division.
Going kind of to a question last week in terms of people coming to Indy, Brett wants to know, he's going to come for the Indy game against the Packers. Do you think fans will be allowed into the stadium at any point in the season? If so, to what capacity?
Oh, Brett, I mean, you're asking questions that does anyone know the answer to? No. Brett, I mean, Brett's one of our best. So Packers game's late, right? Late November, I want to say it is. We pull up the schedule. I saw Iowa State, Jamie Pollard, their AD, announced earlier this week that they're going to allow 30,000, I think, to games. So at least that's what they think.
20 to 25% to start.
Yeah. So what if the Colts can allow 30,000 to games? How does that look? And again, this is strictly conjecture. I have no freaking idea. The Bowen family's just trying to get a baby out in a couple weeks, and that's where we're at. And hopefully no crazy news breaks. And come July 1, we'll have a clear answer. When is that?
November 22nd.
So that's late.
Yeah.
And feel free, Chris, if you have any thoughts on this. My general thought is this, and I get asked this on a daily basis by my neighbor, by my in-laws, by whoever. Can you fit 30,000? And can your season ticket holders occupy? I don't know off the top of my head how many season ticket holders that the Colts have, but how much do they occupy of that? Mm-hmm. And then do you throw some single game tickets out there? And people are going to have to adjust. You might have sat in section 222, row 12, and seat 18 for Peyton for, 15 years. Well, you know what? Like, that might not happen. You might have to be moved a little bit.
Right.
So are you all the even seat season ticket holders get in the building for one game, and then week 3 or 4, whenever the Colts have their next home game, all the odd season ticket holders are in the building. I think I threw out the other day, like, even sections, odd sections. That makes no sense because you have everyone in the section, literally in the building, which doesn't social distance very well. But can you do that? Even odd numbers. It's something
it's such a crapshoot. Like, no one knows. Nobody knows. And until, I think the benefit that the NFL has is that if hockey does come back, if the NBA does come back, if baseball, which I don't think is coming back, comes back, they get the advantage of seeing how they do it, and they get to adjust.
They get time. Like the NFL, this is a tremendous blessing. Because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Corona was probably a cesspool down in Miami during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it spread big time, even in the early parts of 2020 when we didn't know a whole lot about it. So, look, I'm as fascinated as anyone else. I have debated with my friends, and maybe we'll be doing some radio here later in the week where we'll debate the whole NBA, best case scenario for them and that. And Brett, I wish I had a better answer. Packers game, I mean, sure, I'll say 30,000 in the building, but maybe that's me trying to be optimistic.
Garrett wants to know, with the shortfall of the offseason preparation, how do you see the first half of the season going, and what will be a telling record going into the second half of that season?
Will you rattle off the first, I guess, until the bye week? Read off those games for me.
We got the Jets, the Bears, the Browns, the Bengals.
Oh, I thought it was Jags to start off. At Jags.
I'm sorry, you're right. Jags, Vikings, at the Jaguars on the 13th of September.
Okay.
Vikings come here on the 20th. Then you got the Jets back at Lucas Oil, at Chicago, and then you go to Cleveland, and then the Bengals come here, and I believe that's the bye week. So
they got the Lions come out of the bye.
Jags, Vikings, Jets, Bears, Browns, Bengals.
So is that 6 or 7 games?
That is 6 games.
Well, I would. Boy, anything less than 4-2, you probably feel like you're playing behind the 8 ball. Yeah. And again, I think it's more of like, and I tried to drill this home, Joey and I, last year, of saying the Colts are 5-2 at the bye. Let's all pump the brakes. We just watched this football team. Their point differential is not 5-2 point differential. I wrote a huge article about it, looked at past history with teams. Like, to me, record means a lot, but it's also telling of, like, how does that team look?
Right.
There can be different 5-2s. There were different 5-2s last year in the NFL at that time. So I don't want to, like, lock myself into a record, Garrett, with that. At 4-2, to me, that would be just kind of the bottom. And let's be honest, I don't care if you play the Jaguars 6 times to start the year. You go 5-1 in the NFL, that's damn good. Like, this is a tough league. So I'll say 4-2. But you know what? If they're 3-3 and, crazy fluky stuff happens in the losses and I see dominant wins, I didn't see dominance from the Colts last year. I didn't see things that could last for the entire season. And obviously that ended up happening.
Pierce wants to know an over-under question. Paris Campbell has 3.5 receiving touchdowns this year.
Let's go receiving. I like how he threw that in there.
Yeah,
because
you never know.
He could be a returner, jet sweep guy. Yep. Boy, that's a good one, Pierce. Pierce, you're probably smart at your job. Let's go over. Just barely. 4, maybe 5. But yeah, that's a good one.
Yuri has a question for us. Do you envision any regressions in any players, or who might struggle in the schemes, and how can they overcome that?
Well, I mean, at this point, you would hope that you've drafted everyone for these schemes, considering your defense is year 3 and your offense is year 3 as well. I mean, I've always worried about Hooker in this scheme. Anthony Walker a little bit. But did we talk about Anthony Walker on last week's podcast? I kind of forget.
A little bit in terms of The defensive scheme, yeah. In terms of players that were potentially drafted for Pagano's scheme instead of Ballard or instead of Wright.
Yeah. I like Walker. Again, I think he's a healthier Clayton Geathers. Walker, I've always worried about some of the corners. Quincy would have been atop that list. Obviously, he's gone now, so not as much there. Offensively, I don't really think you get swallowed up in a scheme. I don't. I think Frank Reich is, pretty innovative with that. So yeah, I don't. No one is like crystal clear. Tyquan Lewis maybe, but I feel like you just kind of do this. If any player's been bad or like not lived up to expectations, you're kind of like, are they good scheme fits? I feel like that's kind of like the popular thing to do.
Got a question from Drew, who is also a Memphis native and a Vol fan. Drew, shout out to you.
How about that?
Love it. He wanted to know with the Tiger and Peyton, if Tiger and Peyton Manning were on separate teams this past weekend, Kevin, who would you cheer for?
Oh, Tiger. Yeah, no, zero questions asked. Tiger. People, you guys have heard me. I got issues. And Tiger is atop the list. My cheering in sports is kind of like, and don't get me wrong, without Peyton Manning, I don't have a job. Like, that's what Peyton has done for our city. So I don't want to lose sight of that. And huge, and just love watching Peyton growing up and all of that. But my fandom at age 30 is Tiger Woods, Notre Dame basketball, Notre Dame football, who I've drawn in my Indy 500 Calcuttas, who else I've probably thrown some money on, and that's about it. And there's a steep drop-off after that. It's just, that's where my fandom is. Tiger. But, man, Peyton hit some big shots.
He did. His approach game is very good.
Peyton was solid. He was solid there. Brady looked like he just...
Looked like me for the first 6 holes.
Yeah, it looked like you want to curl up with Giselle in bed after that start. Boy, Tiger looked good. Tiger was solid.
So you're bidding on the cart?
I would love to. If I had that money. I know some Colts fans are pissed that the Colts weren't more prominently on the cart. Why didn't they get the driver's side of the car? Why did the Broncos get the driver's side? Why isn't he wearing an Indiana hat? He's wearing a Colorado hat.
That checkerboard looked real nice.
Yeah, it did. It did.
Question from Joseph about special teams in terms of Nyheim Hines. How many touchdowns will he have on special teams this year?
I mean, you'd set the over-under at a half. Like, it's, the Colts have had, when Hines took it to the house last year in the punt return, it was the first time since 2012. It's hard. I mean, returns are dying. You don't get a lot of chances anymore. So I'll say 1, but I mean, that's probably on the high end.
How much do the returns diminish this year with the new 4th and 15 rule?
Oh, that is a good call. Yeah, we'll obviously see if that gets implemented. I don't think you'll have teams go crazy with it. I don't. I think it'll be the very end of game situation. Like, even if you're the Chiefs, 4th and 15, that's a tough freaking down to convert. Yeah. And if you don't, you're giving the ball to the 25-yard line. And, if you have penalties, I mean, think about that as well. I mean, that kills you. But I am a fan of implementing 4th and 15. To me, it's like, it does 2 things for me, which should appease people on both sides of it. It's more entertaining, and it's a safer play. The onside kick ain't safe.
Right.
And you've tried to create this, okay, you can only have 5 people on each side or whatever the number is, and there's no running starts. And so, like, the onside kick sucks. It is a let's go get Indy 11's best player and see if, they can bounce a ball that takes a weird bounce off a football-shaped ball, and whoever can just punch each other in the you-know-what underneath the pile, hopefully we can come out of there with it. Like, that sounds like it. That is a lucky bounce. 4th and 15, it's a real play. Mm-hmm. It's an offense against a defense. It takes talent. I don't think the defense will be crazy winded like people think. You're going to have a break in TV in between the extra point and coming back to do the 4th and 15 play. So, again, entertainment, safety. Those are the 2 things that they discuss in those league meetings all the time. How can we be safer? How can we be more entertaining? Tell me if you disagree, but I think 4th and 15 is just a more entertaining play.
And I give the NFL props because every time a rule is established or a potential rule comes into play, I always think that the NFL is already one of the most entertaining sports out there. How can it get even more entertaining? And they somehow find a way to throw a wrinkle in to keep us watching.
Is it, like moving the extra point back, was it earth-shattering? No. Does it make you now have to sit on the couch?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a Colts fan for a little longer? Yes, it does. So I was, Frank Reich, I think, was on with maybe Rich Eisen last week, and he said that he's open-minded to it, and he's interested in it, and he thinks the Colts could be good in that situation. Hello, Michael Pittman. But he wasn't as totally gung-ho all in on it as maybe you would think the aggressive-minded Frank Reich. And you can only do it 2 times a game. So you got to think about that as well. If you do get behind, it is a good way. And I would have to look up the whole percentages, but, I don't think 4th and 15 is just going to be it's not going to be 50%. Hell, it's not going to be 30%. 4th and 15 is hard. I don't care if you got Julio, Tyreek Hill, and whoever else as your wideout core.
Got a question from Sobro, another Packer question, actually. He's a loyal listener to the podcast.
Sobro.
He wants to know which team is in a better quarterback situation, the Colts with an aging but motivated Rivers and a decent backup, or the Packers with a pissed Aaron Rodgers who may be wanting to bail and a rookie backup.
Packers. 0 questions asked. I mean, Sobro, I know you're extremely loyal, and I appreciate that, but is that even a question? I mean, I don't care. If Aaron Rodgers is pissed off, that he's a pissed off, I'm going to prove everybody wrong pissed off. And if Aaron Rodgers leaves after 1 year, here's your first-round pick that you throw into the fire and you go there. They have a short-term quarterback that's top 5 in the league and a potential long-term franchise quarterback. The Colts have a short-term quarterback that is top 15 in the league? And no long-term answer.
Right.
I mean, I have maybe Jacob Eason, but so to me, sure, is it awkward? Maybe a little awkward, but okay, if Rodgers says F you, then okay, Jordan Love, here you go, and let's see in game settings.
If I'm a Packer fan, I'm more worried about who are these guys throwing the ball to.
Right. Yeah, Devin Funchess. Yeah.
CW wants to know, talking about quarterbacks, when are they going to give up on the quote-unquote we like Jacoby garbage? You don't like him very much, clearly, he says. And deep down, he can't be thrilled with the situation. Is he just the coolest, hopeful starting quarterback in the NFL ever, or does something still have to give here?
CW, they haven't slammed the door shut on him. They haven't. And I don't know, maybe teams are desperate for quarterbacks, and Reich's just I think Reich is a steady believer in a firm believer in having a steady backup quarterback. I think, honestly, Colts fans are more fed up with how much money he's making. I mean, I have no issue with Jacoby Brissett being your backup quarterback. It's the amount of money. That's where I think people have the issue. But, if Rivers blanks the bed this year and decides to go put on the headset in Alabama, I mean, are you going to go into next year with just Jacob Eason on your roster? Do you try to re-sign Jacoby? How do you handle that? I think that's what they're thinking, just back of mind. Let's have the insurance policy in place.
Yash, who lives out in Denver, wants to know about sports facilities opening up. What's the word here in Indy? And also, are there any chance of the Colts reporting anytime soon?
Well, what are we at? I think it's 75 people are allowed in the Colts complex. I think starting this week, maybe last week it started.
Okay.
But, no coaches. Players are allowed in if you're rehabbing. So the Kamoko Toures of the world, the Paris Campbells of the world, those guys can be in the building. Coach is not allowed in. I know Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports, tweeted out yesterday or wrote the article on whatever it is. Maybe by the end of June they'll have a mini camp. It's you think NFL Players Association is going to sign off on that? I mean, that's the whole thing with this. The Players Association they're going to play the leverage card hard, and especially during a voluntary portion of the offseason. Are they really going to leave their families across the country and come in for 3 days of work without pads on? I don't know if they see the meaning in that. So, Yash, I'd be surprised if we see players in the building. I think I'd still be surprised if we saw players in the building in a full team setting in June. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that'll change. Hopefully it'll change, I guess, just to give us something. But I'd be a little bit surprised. I just think there are a few more hurdles to clear. Coaches aren't even in the building.
Yeah.
Coaches got to get in the building.
Right.
And then you got to implement a few players. I mean, do you just bring all 90 of them back at once?
Little side note to that, I mean, going back to your article that's up on 1075thefan.com in terms of Jacob Eason and Frank Reich's comment, do you know, or has it been discussed how often Frank Reich jumps into certain Zoom meetings with different, the defense, the offense, different quarterback room, running back room, whatever that may be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think primarily Reich is with the offense, but there's certainly he's got to have a team meeting at some point. What I like of what Reich has done is he has mentioned, he had Doc Rivers on. Mm-hmm. That was, I think, a Phillip Rivers connection. Rivers and Doc know each other from Southern California and that. And then Reich knew Ray Allen, and they had Ray Allen speak. Like, it's those sorts of things of breaking up the whole monotony of it. They talked yesterday about, for 5 minutes to break up a meeting, we have guys play tic-tac-toe. Or, just two guys. Like, Chris, you've been on Zoom calls. I've been on Zoom calls. I taught a class at IU this past semester via Zoom for 95% of it. I mean, these kids looked at me. I don't even know if they made one emotional expression in the 2 hours they were on the Zoom. Like, people lose interest so quickly on Zoom.
So fast.
So you've got to do things that might be weird, quirky, attention spans, something like that. Your message can get tired in person. It gets a whole lot more tired over Zoom. So I think Reich's doing a really good job of trying to be innovative. Yes, I think primarily they're getting into position groups where it's only 8 of them in a room or something like that, and their position coach knows them pretty well. But I do think Reich's kind of diving in and out of various meetings.
So that explains a question that we have from Old Danner about the Colts' relationship with Ray Allen and Doc Rivers, because he was wondering about that.
Yeah, that's where it is. Again, Doc knew Phillip Rivers from, I guess, San Diego, LA sort of thing. And then Frank Reich, I'm not sure where the Ray Allen connection was, but yeah, that's how all of that is. I know Ballard's really close with Jeff Van Gundy. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that would be something that you would go with. Reich did mention, I think Phil Jackson spoke with the Eagles.
How does a Ballard Van Gundy connection happen?
Houston. Ballard used to be an area scout with the Bears. He still lived in Texas at the time. And so I think a radio host introduced the two with that. And Reich said one thing they are trying to implement with their players is like visualization. Mm-hmm. Visualize not playing in front of fans. That, and again, that's like a much more of a psychology sort of coach think to it all. But that is something that they're trying to do a little bit more of here in the virtual setting.
Well, talking about Ballard with the Bears, a little Mitchell Trubisky question here. Patrick wants to know, with Rivers' playing window being what it is and Brissett being the de facto backup, do you see Ballard, who's shown an interest in signing former high-round picks, giving a quarterback like Mitchell Trubisky, who's only 25, a chance, especially given that Frank Reich would be the guy that would mentor him?
Ah, boy. You know how I feel. I don't love any quarterback retreads. I'm a little worried about Trubisky's psyche, man. Number 3 overall pick, Mahomes and Watson in the same draft doing their thing, and you're just shitting the bed. I'd rather get someone you've identified in the draft and you've developed on your own. Who knows? Maybe they love Trubisky coming out, and maybe they be all in on this, and they think, okay, it can be Tannehill, 2.0 of get him in a different environment. He can be better, but yeah, it is something to where I would probably not go there. I will say that something, Reich mentioned this yesterday on the Zoom call of, a reason why they were more aggressive this offseason was because of they know Rivers is 38. Mm-hmm. That and the roster patience of you felt like you're in a good cap situation to where you could be more aggressive. I would rather fall in love with a draft quarterback.
Well, let's stay in that draft class for a second here with a question from George. With all the uncertainty surrounding Malik Hooker, do you think it's possible that the Colts look at potentially trading for Jamal Adams? And how do you think he makes a safety room better, if any?
And we got several questions on this. So, thank you for those. Send it in, Jamal Adams. Chris, you'll find this out with this podcast. Anytime a player is rumored on the trade block or free agency, we get about 5 questions.
Heck
back.
Yeah.
It's
especially a Jet. Come on.
Exactly. That's a great point. Part of being a fan. So, isn't Jamal Adams more of a thumper? Isn't he kind of more of that physical safety? So I don't.
Whereas Hooker's the ball hawk.
Right. And I feel like the Colts want versatile and are starting to get more. And I mean, Adams is a top 10 pick for a reason. He's been really durable, unlike Hooker. You'd be giving up more for Adams, certainly. You'd have to. I mean, Malik Hooker for Jamal Adams ain't happening straight up. And the money, like you just said, the money. Mega contract. I mean, are you willing to pay that money? Does he want top safety money?
With the guys that we still have to pay, I mean, yes, it makes the defense better, but that's so much money.
Agreed. So, another thing is, I don't have this in front of me, but he has struggled, I want to say, taking away the ball. Jamal Adams, I don't think has had many interceptions in his NFL career. I mean, remember, Hooker's had 7 picks in 34 games. And I just don't think Adams has been that sort of ball hawk of finding the ball.
No, he has 2 career interceptions.
And how many games? He's the same draft class as Hooker.
I
don't think he hasn't missed many.
No, I'm just right now just the quick searches on snaps.
Yeah, I mean, let's say he's played whatever.
A lot more. He's in the backfield more than he is.
For sure.
He gets more sacks than he does interceptions by.
Yeah, he plays closer to the line of scrimmage. And maybe that's an intriguing chess piece, but, again, you'd have to give up a draft pick in my mind, something in the middle-ish rounds, maybe higher than that. You do that, you only have 7 draft picks going to next year. Does that limit if you can trade up for a quarterback? What are my thoughts?
Got a question here from Wyatt, a hypothetical. Assuming that Phillip Rivers calls it quits after the 2020 season, the Packers, another Packer question, shop Aaron Rodgers and Ballard deals his 2021 first-rounder and maybe another to sweeten the deal to bring him to Indy to finish his career. Does Aaron Rodgers get to wear number 12?
Yes. Yeah. Andrew Luck's number is not getting retired, folks.
No, it's not in the rafters.
No, I hate this because I feel like I'm trashing on Andrew Luck, and he's a great player. But come on now, there's a level of a retired number. Did the Colts reach the Super Bowl with Andrew Luck? Is that Andrew Luck's fault? No, but not all on Andrew Luck, certainly. But that doesn't mean all of a sudden here's the statue out front and the jersey's never going to be worn again. Like,
I'd let him wear a Packer jersey.
Yeah, exactly. He can wear purple for every game for all I care. Yes, you would hand him number 12 and you would say, Aaron Rodgers, here you go for the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Kevin Drew has a question for us, wondering who do you think leads in snap percentage out of the wide receivers, the running backs, and let's throw in tight ends just for fun.
Okay. I would assume Hilton, if he's healthy, still at wide out. Yeah, I just can't see Michael Pittman being a 95% snap guy from day one. Running backs is tough. Great debate. Really good debate. Man, it's in Vegas, you probably get slightly better odds on Marlon Mack. I might be willing to bet on Jonathan Taylor. And maybe I'm going off of Taylor's durability in college, and Mack might miss, those 1 or 2 games he seems to miss every year here in the NFL. Maybe Taylor now becomes that guy because the NFL is obviously more physical. Jack Doyle for sure at tight ends. That's a no-brainer. I mean, hell, he was out-snapping Eric Ebron by 30 or 40 a game.
Rob wants to know how much of a role did getting hired late in the 2016 affect Ballard's 2017 draft picks. One could argue that because he didn't have his guys, quote-unquote, scouting, that might have led to bust, but aren't a lot of the current scouts holdovers from the Grixon era?
Yeah, Rob, I feel like we get some form of this question every week, Chris, and it's just kind of like, are we just continually making excuses for what that 2017 draft was? Like, let's call it like it is. It was a horrific first 4 picks. Great news. Chris Ballard recovered like none other. Ryan Grixon never recovered from the 2013 draft. Never did. 2014, Jack Mewhort decides to retire early. Dante Moncrief is up and down. Jonathan Newsom is up in Canada now. Like, there's nothing. And then 2014 draft, and obviously you have the Richardson draft pick, traded for as well. Bjorn Werner was a bust in 2013. You move into 2015, Dorsett, DeJohn Smith. Like, he just never recovered. Ballard did.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's, calling it like it is. He had pretty much all his area scouts in place. He really has kept a lot of his area scouts. It's more of the upper level guys. Think of like the Ed Dodds of the world and those people. So yeah, I feel like we can just kind of move on of like, it was a awful start to the draft. Had a nice end to it with Anthony Walker, Marlon Mack, and Grover Stewart. And then 2018, he traded back and absolutely knocked a home run out of the park. And you feel like there's some intrigue with 2019 as well. So, yeah, we don't have to sit here and again sculpt the Chris Ballard statue tomorrow.
Right.
Like, the record is what your win-loss record is. It is a slow rebuild, and part of the reason why it's been a slow rebuild is because of the swing and the miss that happened in 2017 as well.
Let's stick with that draft class and Anthony Walker, as you mentioned. Shout out to Brent, who's new to Twitter because he wanted to ask this question, so thank you for listening.
How about that? Thank you, Brent. I had a roommate named Brent. He was one of my favorite humans in the world, Uncle Diesel, Brent Young.
Uncle Diesel.
Yeah. Uncle Diesel could throw him back with the best of them.
I'm sure there's plenty of stories we can talk about off the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go there. Maybe a Howard Stern podcast.
But he's writing, wanting to know about Bobby Okereke potentially replacing Anthony Walker at the middle linebacker position. Is there anything stopping the Colts from giving him a go at the Sam position next year? He would hate to see the Colts let such an outstanding player / person hit free agency. Brent,
this is what I was just talking about. I think it's a really good question. I'm a big Anthony Walker fan. I get that he's a hair limited athletically, but Chris, there's something to his durability, his reliability, his smarts that I don't want to overlook. He led the team in tackles last year because he played every game.
Right.
Darius Leonard didn't. There is something to be said of just like I mentioned earlier, he's a healthier Clayton Geathers. And I think the staff loves and Darius Leonard's obsessed with them.
I was going to say they are best friends.
Darius Leonard is obsessed with them. Now, the Sam position doesn't play a whole lot. You just don't. And a reason why you don't play the Sam a whole lot is because Kenny Moore is best suited in the nickel, in the slot. So you want to get Kenny Moore to his best spot. It's all this kind of domino trickle-down effect. I'm curious to see how this plays out, though. And you still have EJ Speed kind of waiting around.
Mm-hmm.
Walker hears people. Walker, he favorited my tweet last week about, I mentioned Bobby Okereke coming and, through Walker's name. I mean, Walker is a smart human.
Yeah.
He hears the chirpers. But Okereke needs snaps. He's got to get on the field. So I do not have a crystal clear answer on how this is going to play out. It's a nice problem to have. Inside linebackers don't get paid a whole lot, so I don't know. Maybe Walker won't have a huge market for him, but yeah, I'll be curious to see how all this plays out.
Kevin, in a 32-team league, the Colts have 4 of the top 40 cap-hitting players, as we mentioned last week on the podcast, and they still have around $20 million in cap space, which is crazy. How is that possible? Feels like either this team is not very talented, or Ballard is brilliant at building with talented value players, which is more true, and that's from Rob.
Yeah, Rob, that's a good question, and it is crazy. When you look at that breakdown that we've talked about. I would say this. The Colts have, in the last, let's say, 4 off seasons, the Colts have not signed great players to second contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Hilton Costanzo, that was done back in 2015. So, you haven't had this, here's your stud in the 2014 draft, and now he's up for a second contract, and here you go. It goes back to the Grigson thing of, these were where the issues were. So I think that is a reason why. And I go back to what I said earlier about the first question we had in Twitter questions. You don't have the dominant edge rusher, the dominant quarterback, the dominant wideout at age 27 that is going into his prime, those premium paying positions as well. So I think that's how they have room. And the Colts have just had to overturn the roster with a lot of guys on rookie contracts. Yeah. And that helps you out. So I continue to say the best thing is, when you look at quarterback, you aren't tied contractually past the season to only Eason. That is the good news. But I just can't go back to the question and say, Ballard is brilliant until you start to see more of the win-loss be into your direction. I really like a lot of the building that he's done, and the foundation, like I've said, I think is on much more firmer ground, I should say, than it was in the previous regime, which I think is why a lot of people are so obsessed with it and love it. But this goes back to our Eberflus question of if is he on the hot seat and whatnot. Like, it's time to go.
Yeah,
it is time to go. And it just flat out needs to happen.
Gary wants to know, with your history of obviously working with the Colts and your insight and the podcast and everything, how do the Colts manage the Adam Vinatieri situation and come out looking good when he wants to come back?
Part of me, what Gary wants to say, who cares? Like, who cares if they look good? Like, this is the NFL.
Yeah.
You cut Peyton Manning. You've recovered from that. I don't know. Somebody say that they haven't. But, PR-wise, people get it. Just, hey, if you really want to get back a fans, flash up Adam Vinatieri highlight reel from last season and say, is this what you want again?
Yeah.
Now, how do you do it cordially? Press release, Irsay has all the quotes. You don't do that for any other player. Irsay says, first ballot Hall of Famer, this, that, we love him. We just need to go into a different direction. Like, you can't have the press conference, really. I mean, I guess you could, but, maybe Vinny just says, screw that. I don't want a press conference.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep on playing. That's something I think to keep on. But send the long press release out and, the whole looking good thing is fans and people hate nothing more in football, college, NFL, than when the kicker screws up. Because everyone thinks it should be an easy thing. Because we've been ingrained of our extra points, those are easy. Or, the field goals, those are easy. So when kickers screw up, people freak out. They should understand. And I think people do understand. I think we can look at this from a very mature standpoint of greatest kicker of all time, in my opinion, should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. This ain't Hollywood.
No.
Send out the nice press release. Move on.
Yeah, look at Rodrigo last year for Georgia, who's now part of the Colts, at least potentially, missing a kick against South Carolina to lose a game. I mean, they have so much pressure on them, and everyone forgets how many great kicks he made before that. You always remember those misses. You
100% do. It's just life of being a freaking kicker.
Well, let's look to the future a little bit here with John's question. It looks like the intended big three will be Pittman as the big man, Paris Campbell as a speed and gadget guy, and Zach Pascal as a slippery route runner, with T.Y. seeming poised to have a 1,000-yard receiving season. Is there any chance that any of these young guys could also get to 1,000 receiving yards this year? In other words, is anyone going to step up in a big way to help get some pressure off of T.Y.?
Well, John, it is the age-old question. So he wants 2 over 1,000 yards. Boy, that's that is a lot to ask. I can't imagine the last time the Colts have had it. I'm going to guess it hasn't been in the last decade. Hilton's rookie season, I think he was a hair over 800, and Reggie had a Pro Bowl year. But look, I don't think you need to have a guy. Why not spread it out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say you rush for 2,000 yards. Hilton for 1,000. Michael Pittman for 700. Campbell for 600. Something like that. Tight ends, take whatever. I think you can spread it out. And, we've talked about Campbell and you just being the more complete route runner and how important it is for him to stay healthy in practice settings and all those things. They feel like he's got a character trait that's similar to Hines. We saw Hines back, get over, I guess, the fumbles he had early on in his career. Can Campbell do that as well, of having the high character, bouncing back? Obviously, Hines didn't have the injuries that Campbell had. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm just going back to the Phillip Rivers aspect with the way that he likes to throw the ball to tight ends. He had obviously 2 very good running backs last year. Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I didn't even mention running backs.
Keenan Allen, 1,000 yards. Mike Williams, 1,001 yards. So if they do get 2 over 1,000, it would be very, very small.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk by any means. I know some people are obsessed with numbers. I think Pittman has kind of warned people that he might be changing his number. He's 86 for now. I think he's mentioned that something in the teens or, in those kind of 10 to 12 range, if that were to come available, he might be willing to do that. So thought I'd throw that in there.
Scotty's got a question. He's been to 3 Colts games, each of them losses. At the Dolphins in 2001, the infamous Patriots game in 2015, and the Jaguars in 2017. Which home game do you think he should go to this year, or should he just stay at home?
Oh, Scotty, you got to stay at home. I mean, boy. Yeah, you went to the Patriots game in 2015. That's a freaking fake punt game.
Yeah.
I thought you probably should have self-banned yourself then. And then the Jaguars in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, the Colts got shut out that day. That was when Jacoby was sacked 10 times. Scotty, I think you got to self-ban yourself. And if you're not, I think the metal detector might go off when you come through Lucas Oil next time. I hate to say it.
Yeah, I think looking at the schedule, you either come to the Jets game or the Jaguars game. But
yeah, you might.
That,
I was going to say, Colts lost to the Dolphins at home last year, Scotty. I thought you were going to say you were in the building for that one. You might need to save yourself for a tank season. Save yourself for end of the season when you need to improve the whole draft position. So, damn, that's quite the run, Scotty.
Yeah, come get a cheaper ticket another year.
Yeah, boy. Oof. Is that it, man?
That's all. That's all we got for Twitter questions this week.
Awesome. Like I said, for any of you that missed that we didn't get to your Twitter question, we'll save those for next week's podcast. And as always, 1075thefan.com, plenty of written content up there on the site this week. Jacob Eason film recap. Just post something on Kamoko Toure. I know a lot of people are intrigued by him. We might touch on him on next week's podcast a little bit more. And yeah, man, as long as Baby Bone doesn't come this week, 38 weeks today, we'll be back on Tuesday.
Love it.
He's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everyone have a great rest of your week, great weekend as well, and we'll be back next week on Kevin's Corner.